Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us for the California Community Foundation's Making Good Organizations Great Capacity Building webinar. This is about how you, as a donor, can help your favorite nonprofit organization become more self-sustaining to achieve its mission. Now, at the California Community Foundation, we strive to empower our philanthropists to become more knowledgeable about how to make a significant impact on the issues, causes, and organizations we care so much about. In line with that goal, we're here today to talk about capacity building. So while we're all aware that we can help an organization by giving a grant to support its programs, we're generally less familiar with the alternative method of support, and that's through capacity building. Now, capacity building grants help to strengthen the nonprofit organization itself institutionally, so that in the long term, it's better able to sustain the programs we care about and make them ultimately more effective for the community. So what kinds of capacity building services exist? Essentially, if there's any function of the organization, there's likely a capacity strengthening service available for it. However, today, we'll focus on the three kinds of capacity building services that speak to the critical pillars of an organization's institutional strength. Those are financial sustainability, program effectiveness, and board leadership development. In addition to discussing capacity building today as a method of helping your favorite nonprofit reach its next level, which is good in most all circumstances, capacity building is especially timely in light of the current economic challenges. Organizations have found themselves in a crunch of decreased funding streams and increased need among the community. While this, of course, can be very challenging, it can also be a great opportunity. It's an opportunity to assess one's strengths and where they can have their real niche as an organization, being the leader in serving a community on that issue. And it can also be an opportunity to assess one's weaknesses, to address and overcome them. This is what we believe is essentially addressed through capacity building. So if you have supported an organization over the years that you find is still in the same place of breaking even with its budget, or you know of a great organization whose work you want to be sure lasts for years to come, or if you know an organization and have a relationship with them and you know they've been severely impacted by the economy, a capacity building grant may be an ideal way to help that organization overcome today's challenges and unleash their potential for long-term sustainability. Our first presenter will be Carla Salazar of the Nonprofit Finance Fund, here to talk with us today about financial sustainability.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Happy Friday. We made it through the week. And yes, I'm going to talk about finance. A lot of fun on a Friday. So bear with me. At least it's a short 10-minute introduction, and I'm trying to be very disciplined about sticking to the 10 minutes. So let's start. So who is a nonprofit finance fund? So we are a community development financial institution established in 1980 by Clara Miller. We are headquartered in New York, and I'm very pleased to state that as of last year, May 2010, we just opened our office in Los Angeles. Thanks to the partnerships with the California Community Foundation, Vanguard, Bank of America, California Wellness, and First Sight Los Angeles. So I'm very pleased to be in my native Los Angeles providing the type of services that we give our clients. So as a national nonprofit organization with 7 offices nationwide, we provide affordable capital and financial management services to our nonprofits. What I like to say, my tagline, a nonprofit helping another nonprofit. Together with others, we have flowed over $1 billion into our sector. We make loans of up to $2 million in terms of facility, equipment, and working capital loans. And also we work with funders in helping them manage program-related investments. who is our typical client? Our typical client typically comes to us during periods of change, whether they're looking at undertaking growth, building their fixed assets, or looking at the opportunity of downsizing or moving into a new line of business. We serve all subsectors, and their budgets ranging in between $300,000 to $50 million. So in today's economy, the fact that some of our nonprofits are able to break even is commendable. But it's our philosophy that in order for us to have long-term sustainability and viability in our communities, we need to move beyond breaking even. Like any other organization, for-profit organization, we need profits in order to build our reserves, in order to have savings, in order to have surpluses. We need the ability to cover our full costs, and that is a challenge for the majority of our nonprofits in our sector. We are strong believers that the fact that the classification of 501c3 status, it's that alone, it's our tax status, and should not be our business model. So what is it that we mean when we talk about covering full cost? Well, we're saying is moving beyond operating expenses. We need to cover fixed asset additions, depreciation, reserves, working capital, and if applicable, debt in principle. It's with addressing that alone that we are able to make the right ask and are able to stop creating a gap between covering a full cost in our sector. Oftentimes, a lot of our clients and partners ask us, what is it that you look at, when you're examining a nonprofit? So this is our cheat sheet. So where there's two major financial statements that we focus on, which is your income statement or profit and loss, as some others know, and then your balance sheet. And so we look at the profitability and savings, the revenue and expense dynamics, and really dig deep and have those, heart-to-heart conversations and sometimes difficult conversations with the leadership, and really understanding what are the cost dynamics for that organization. Are they putting all their eggs in one basket? Do they have diversification in their revenue streams? Does management adjust costs in response to revenue shortfalls? And in terms of the health of the balance sheet, are they able to have the size and nature and distribution of their assets? Are they appropriate for the organization's business and programs over the long term? Liquidity, we answer the question, how many months of cash should the organization have? And most importantly, how many months of unrestricted liquid net assets does the organization have to really cover its day-to-day expenses? And that's really essential for the organization to have. When we first engage with our organization, we really want them to have a solid understanding of their financial landscape. So, I apologize, we keep moving around. Four of the major financial tools that we work with our clients focus on diagnostic, which is nonprofit business analysis and financial situation analysis. Then we have I consider our practical management tools. We'll really go in depth, look at cash flow planning, scenario and program profitability. There's the facility solutions for those organizations that own buildings, and then we have our workshops and clinics. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the workshops and clinics, we use that as an opportunity to really walk our clients through, what are some of the red flags or financial statements. It's moving beyond the accounting components, really looking, answering the questions, what are the key questions that we should be asking when looking at our statement of activities, when we're looking at the balance sheet. Our financial leadership clinic gives us an opportunity to work with our nonprofits in a cohort. It's a 2-day intensive where, we give them the opportunity we work with them on analyzing the financial statements, and then they have an opportunity to come together and present their findings to the audience, to the group. So it's an excellent learning opportunity. We've gotten very good feedback on that. Just yesterday, I was in Riverside presenting in a workshop, a 4-half-day workshop, and one of the comments that we got from our client was that it was the most practical workshop that they ever attended, where they had tools to come back to and really work on. That was a moment of pride. I had to drive all the way to Riverside for those who are local. Not a fun drive, but 97 degrees. But that really made it worthwhile for me. So I was very excited to get that type of feedback, especially when it comes to numbers. So once we do the assessment, Then we dig into what I call the practical management tools. As we may know, a lot of our organizational leadership, we depend on last year's data. Our financial statements are looking at our snapshot of last year. As a manager of any organization, we know that we need today's data to make those difficult decisions. So depending on the need of the organization, you see the circle as a continuum. We could start out with the cash flow planning. That's essential, especially if you're looking at the opportunity of opening a line of credit. That's the first thing a bank will ask you, or we also do that as a lender. That's the first thing we'll ask, do you have a cash flow report? So we work on them developing that with them. Depending if they're looking at opportunity of downsizing or just getting a really good handle of the economics of their programs, we do a program profitability analysis, really having understanding as a whole, as an enterprise, the organization as a whole, which programs are bringing a surplus or a deficit to the organization. That's very instrumental to know because in the economics of our sector, we allocate costs throughout. And as a project manager, it's really difficult to have an understanding of what are the economics of my program. Am I bringing a surplus or a deficit? So this is a great one-page document that we provide that. It's a great tool for the board. And last but not least, is a scenario testing. Once we have a solid understanding of the economics of your programs, we then can move on into what-if scenarios. Best or worst case scenario where we're looking at what would happen to the organization if you were to lose 10% of your revenue or 20%. Or we could do as very complex as looking at analyzing the different streams of revenue and looking at, what are the possibilities of diversifying the impact of the organization as a whole. So that's just to give you a little snapshot. These are some of our basic tools. We also have a financial dashboard that we just developed that it's not reflected there. We do a lot of the customized, but these are our standard tools that we use with our clients. And last but not least, we have the facility solutions. We work with nonprofits that own buildings or have a long-term lease that are responsible for all repairs and replacement and give them that really in-depth assessment of the 20-year repair and replacement needs and costs for the nonprofit facility. This is a tool that then they could turn around and use as a forecast and present to potential funders and donors to help them understand what are the future costs that they're going to be having in order to replace that building or maintain the existing building. So it's a very comprehensive approach. We work with engineer, architect, or construction consultant, and then we work on the forecast. We interpret the numbers for them. So our approach with working with our nonprofits, our ultimate goal as anyone who is involved in our sector is to the long-term financial sustainability and viability of our organizations. They're servicing a community that we're very much invested in. So when working with them, we understand that if they're struggling with the financial landscape, we focus on education. We start off with education. Help them really understand the counterintuitive money rules that exist in our sector and provide them with the in-depth nonprofit analysis so they have the tools to then communicate their financial needs in a comprehensive and clear manner to funders and donors. We then move on to the plan. Once you have that foundation in place, then we can move on into the planning and decision making. How do we interpret that financial data, that access, and how can we then execute it, implement it? Because it's not, there will always make folks aware there's a knowing and doing gap. You can have access to all the data, but if you don't move on it in a timely and effective manner, it serves no purpose. And ultimately what we want to take them is to a success and ongoing improvement process, and we believe it's not a one-time process. We go back to that circle. It's a continuum, like a rinse, and dry, and wash and rinse. It's a continuum process because the organizations are evolving and changing. So our goal is to bring them to greater financial clarity, comfort, and strength. And we encourage them to build a rigorous self-evaluation metrics for their ongoing management practice. So in a nutshell, in 10 minutes, that's what we do. And here's our contact information. Please feel free to contact us, email us. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Please feel free to connect with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carla. Again, that was Carla Salazar from the Nonprofit Finance Fund speaking to us about financial sustainability capacity building. And that is our first of 3 kinds of capacities. to demonstrate the practical application value of financial sustainability capacity building, we are very fortunate to have Erin Pack with us from CARE, who was a nonprofit client of the Nonprofit Finance Fund, who will show how it worked in practical application for her organization.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Pack. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the CARE Center, also known as the Korean Health Education, Information, and Research Center. We're a 25-year-old organization based in Koreatown, Los Angeles. CARE operates the nation's only full-time nonprofit community clinic with the cultural and linguistic competency to serve patients in Korean, Spanish, and English. While our Latino patients come from our 2-mile radius, our Korean patients come from 5 different counties in California. In addition to the community clinic, we also operate 2 adult day healthcare centers, one in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and one in Gardena, which is a suburb about 15 miles away from Los Angeles downtown. Each year, we provide 20 to 30,000 human service case visits, 100,000 hot meals to seniors, and about 10,000 medical visits. CARE often conducts SWOT analysis to evaluate our core competencies in comparison to our long-term and short-term goals. About 70% of our agency's entire revenue is generated from the adult day healthcare centers with a single payer source, which is the state of California. All of the ADHD profits go towards our clinic to provide unsubsidized healthcare services to the low-income population. Even though CARE formed the nation's first adult day healthcare center that serves Korean food and does the programming in Korean, it still exists as the only nonprofit ADHD operator serving Koreans in the country. Unfortunately, the marketplace is oversaturated, and fortunately, the private operators are very, very competent and does an excellent job. Our other dilemma is that for the past 3 years, there has been a threat of complete elimination of the ADHDs by the governor. So far, the legislators have approved for 10% rate cut and 50% budget cut. Our ADHDs are open year-round, including major holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, because our seniors are completely dependent on our meals program. According to our survey, more than 90% of our seniors do not eat dinner after they leave our center. Given that fact, we were worried about the hot meals for the indigent Korean seniors. We wanted to explore if there's any way we can sustain some form of a senior program, at least the meals program, even if the ADHDs were eliminated by the state. How should we structure the new organization? Is meals program the best use of our reserve funds? How will we continue to exist as an organization going from $5 million minus 70% of the revenue? Will the clinic be able to sustain itself? There were many, many questions that we had. With NFF, we explored the options of minimal ADHD operations for meal service, complete closure of the ADHDs, new revenue opportunities to sustain the clinic. The outcome was a complete surprise to everybody. The cost of minimal operations for the meal services far, far exceeded our estimate. The board and the staff all agreed that expending all of our reserves for a meals program without any concrete plans for sustainability was not the best use of our funds. Instead, we agreed that shifting our focus to another critical need of housing, assisted living facility, would be a better long-term service for the community that currently has only one single assisted living facility for Koreans when there's over 1.4 million Korean Americans in the United States. As for the clinic, we agreed that we need to invest more money to generate more revenue with a greater sense of urgency and no more reliance on 88Cs or other departments for subsidy. Since the NFS scenario planning, CARE has been really busy taking progressive actions towards fiscal autonomy of each department. We've been busy negotiating lease or renegotiating our ADHD lease. We're researching to add another language group of patient base in the ADHDs. We want to make sure that it's just one additional language to minimize the operational cost and maximize the revenue. We're also looking for public-private partnership opportunity to start our own assisted living facility, which is going to make us eligible for federal funding and free us from any kind of state budget constraints. As for the clinic, we've applied to become HMO contractor. We're marketing our imaging services to other nonprofit clinics and private physicians in the area who don't normally have their own x-ray or mammogram machines. I'm very, very happy to report that we have already secured a 19-month, $1.3 million service contract with the LA County providing physical assessments. We're far more fortunate than many other nonprofits. We had a sense of urgency that something had to be done. We didn't know how or where to get started, but we knew that something had to be done. At a most opportune time, CCF convened all the grantees to learn about NFF services. I've been sharing our NFF scenario planning experience with many, many nonprofits, especially those at crossroads or simply wanting to bring about some creative changes to their organization. NFF analysis and the tools guided our fact-based decision-making, which is so critical to capacity building and sustainability. We really can't thank you enough for the opportunity that you afforded us. We now feel prepared for what's to come, even all the unknowns. Thank you again for your thoughtful funding decision.
Thank you very much. That was Erin Pack from CARE explaining the practical application benefits of her work for financial sustainability capacity building with the Nonprofit Finance Fund. So we've heard from the Nonprofit Finance Fund. We are now going to move to the second capacity builder presenter of our presentation today. It's called Special Service for Groups. They will talk to us about program effectiveness, and Alexis Moreno will be our presenter.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for the introduction. Who is SSG? We'll start out talking about that. SSG, Special Service for Groups, is itself a nonprofit that was incorporated in 1952. We operate 20 direct service programs that deal with youth development, mental health, substance abuse, and older adult programs. Beyond our directly operated programs, we're really known as a group that really responds to priorities identified by local communities. And also we're known for the partnerships and collaborations that we've entered into with other organizations to serve those grassroots communities. Today we'll be primarily talking about SSG's Research and Evaluation Unit, of which I'm a part, and our work as a capacity builder around program evaluation. And really the intent of that is doing program evaluation to increase program effectiveness. So when we talk about program evaluation, we need to start with the question of why is it important. Number one, program evaluation can boost program effectiveness. We heard earlier in Carla's talk about the gap between knowing and doing, and program effectiveness is really based on having knowledge about your program, what are the results, which interventions or programs are successful, and then acting upon that to strengthen programs, to strengthen or reprioritize your efforts. And the second element of doing program evaluation for nonprofits is when you have a clear picture of your successes and your results, you can convey that to your stakeholders potential donors and grant makers and other folks who support you need to operate your program. And as we were preparing this presentation and thinking about the questions that might come up in your mind about program evaluation, the idea came up with, don't organizations already know that they need to do evaluation? Don't they know that donors want to hear about results? The answer is yes. Nonprofits do know that, and often in conversation about evaluation with nonprofit staff members, they'll say, well, we are successful. We know it when we see it, or we can tell you the story about a particular client or participant who went on to do great things. Sometimes we refer to that, especially in youth development work, as the Harvard story, the student who started out as at risk and ended up going to Harvard. And what we really strive to do with nonprofits is make sure that they are capturing those Harvard stories so that they can share them with prospective donors and their other stakeholders. Generally, this is work that's low on the list of priorities. With good cause, many nonprofits are focused on their day-to-day operations and making sure they're getting services to clients and participants. Often funders are supporting implementation of the program and reporting results. So for instance, how many students came to your program? How many students of what age came to your program? And the emphasis on evaluation often isn't there when funding decisions are made or when grant requests are put together. And we really want to make sure that evaluation is an ongoing part of the work of a nonprofit so that the lessons learned, the important successes are captured so that any mistakes are analyzed and we can then improve the programs over time. So back to the role of SSG with the California Community Foundation grantees. SSG was contracted in 2010 for an evaluation capacity building project with CCF grantees called Building Learning Organizations. In 2010, we had a cohort of about 10 agencies who we worked with on evaluation capacity building. And we heard great things from those grantees that the work that we did with them really helped them articulate their programs more clearly, capture their results more clearly, and allowed them to do things like designing and putting out an annual report that really clearly stated their successes and their outcomes. And the program, the Building Learning Organizations, began in 2011 with a second cohort of about 10 additional agencies. So what is it exactly that we do with nonprofits when we're building evaluation capacity? We're really trying to help them use program evaluation as part of this feedback loop for program improvement. And if you look at the chart, it's rather complex, but it really gives a good sense of the whole process. We really start out the first bar on top, creating a shared understanding of program evaluation and related concepts. This is really important. We don't want program evaluation to be the province of only one person in the organization. This is creating capacity among the whole staff and understanding why evaluation is important. We identify outcomes and indicators. If you know what success looks like, how do we talk about that intentionally and regularly for all participants? Aligning program design with stated outcomes. This is really making sure that your program really is providing all the elements you need to have success with your clients. Developing and refining, evaluation tools is really, do we have the ways to capture these stories? Do we have the ways to capture these success with our clients and participants? Developing mechanisms to collect evaluation findings. This is, can be technical skills such as building a database or using spreadsheet programs to really begin to analyze the data. And lastly, or if you're following the arrows, this can also be a beginning point, using evaluation analysis to improve programs and organizational developments. This is really the data-based decision-making. Now that we know what our results look like, what do we do about it to change our program? And by going through this feedback loop with the grantees, what we've really been able to achieve is increasing staff knowledge across all levels of program evaluation and concepts. Again, we don't want it to rest with just one person. It's really the idea that all the different levels of staff, all folks involved with programs, really understand evaluation and how it can help them improve their work. We've increased the capacity of nonprofits to document and evaluate their outcomes. So this is, they themselves are able to define what success is and define how much of that they accomplish for themselves. Oftentimes evaluation is conducted by outside organizations, or organizations are rated or assessed on an external body's criteria. This is really the program staff and agency staff themselves defining success and articulating how well they achieve that. And then the other piece of it is integrating evaluation as a regular part of the organizational culture. This is so that evaluation is not an afterthought at the end of 2 years when you've had a wonderful program with wonderful successes, and then you think about how do we capture this, how do we articulate it, how do we share it. It's really aiming to have evaluation be part of planning, be part of decision making on a regular, ongoing basis. Thinking about, now that we've been working with 2 cohorts of agencies, characteristics of nonprofits that can benefit from this evaluation capacity building. There's kind of 2 intertwined factors. One is accountability change, when nonprofits are looking beyond just reporting numbers served. This is kind of changing from the question of what did we do and responding with numbers served to what difference did it make for our participants. And the second element is organizational development, and this is when the organization really needs some data to share in their fundraising efforts, or also in their policy advocacy efforts. So they really need to have some numbers and some concrete information to share to inform these efforts. And in thinking about the characteristics of nonprofits that really have been most receptive of this capacity building is having leadership buy-in. We talk about having a person who can be the cheerleader or the captain, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the executive director, but somebody who can make sure that this is prioritized and paid attention to by those within the organization. Also, we have come across organizations that have evaluation as part of their strategic plan. They know this is something that they would like to strengthen, but perhaps don't quite know where to start. Additionally, programs or agencies that are young and growing who need some help setting up systems. And of course, and this applies to many or probably most of our nonprofit agencies, or our agencies who are creating or revamping their programs. And this is something that is more and more common given our current funding scenario and increasing needs.
Now, Alexis has just presented special service for groups capacity building through program evaluation for increased program effectiveness. Now, Alexis will present a practical application example of how that kind of capacity building has worked with a nonprofit client, Peace for Kids.
Thanks, Taylor. Peace for Kids has been what I have called at various times our model student in this capacity building initiative. Their work is focused on empowering foster and at-risk youth by providing community as family. And when we met them at the beginning of our work together, we really found some factors there that really made them sort of the ideal agency to participate with us. They have an organizational philosophy of continuous improvement within their own staff. They have regular staff meetings. They were continually thinking about how to be even more successful than they already were. They, like many agencies these days, had concerns about the general funding climate because of the changes in the economy. Excuse me. They had recently gone through a leadership transition with a key staff member who had championed evaluation had left the organization. They were looking to raise more funding and to increase their competitiveness for funding. And they were also looking at a major change in the foster care system that would have been, that did come from the state, and it really increased the age at which foster youth were emancipated from the system. So it really meant that there was a longer amount of time that they could be working with youth who were in the foster care system before they were emancipated. What did we do with Peace for Kids to build their capacity? We developed logic models for their programs that were specific for each age group they serve. They serve 4 to 20-year-olds, which is quite a range. Really, their vision for every child in their program is that they come out with healthy behaviors and they're productive citizens. But what that looks like and what the activities that are appropriate to reach those outcomes are different from age 4 to age 20. So we really helped them articulate at each stage of the youth development, what does the program look like to get them to the end result that we want for all. The second thing we did was developed new and revised intake application forms for all the youth involved with them. And again, this was by age group. So we asked some questions when the students enrolled that then we could go back and revisit at the end of the academic year. So we can compare their responses from the beginning of the program to the end of their time with the program. And the third piece was really plugging into a committee they had existing, but which then evolved into a program improvement committee that has ongoing tasks around evaluation and program design. So what were the results of this work together? Again, looking at their overall result they wanted to achieve and looking at the needs of their target population, Peace for Kids decided that they really needed to reach kids in the preschool to early school age, so that was 4 to 6 years old. And that is an expansion of their program, and we help them design the program for the 4 to 6 age group based on the logic models and their previous successes with the other age groups. The second item is that because we developed a logic model that clearly articulated all the elements of the program and the ways in which their students were successful, it allowed them to submit a proposal to the Department of Justice, which I believe was the largest grant request they had made and the first government request they had made for funding. And they really felt that the work that we had done with the logic model really made them a much stronger proposal for this Department of Justice grant. And the third result was that we now have different sets of tools and questions on the intake form that allow the agency to understand where their youth are at when they begin and what results they've had at the end of the year. And we're currently training their staff on inputting this data and doing analysis of it so they can use it again for decision making. And thinking about what does this all mean for the agency? What's the long-term impact? First, it's increased their program effectiveness. Again, they're able to, with a clear picture of what they want to achieve with the youth and a clear picture of the steps along there where they're able to prioritize where they're going to put staff, where they're going to put new volunteers, where are the most important pieces that the program needs to be supported and upheld. The program impact, we really are putting mechanisms in place so that they can measure from school year to school year what are the results, what difference is their program making for their participants. Program funding, again, they're able to develop proposals that more clearly articulate the strengths of their work. And program sustainability, this is really, they're really excited about using the evaluation results and the data that they're collecting to use as part of their fundraising case statement. And the timing was really fortuitous here that they were involved in another capacity building program that was focused particularly on fundraising. And our last slide is our contact information at SSG. We're happy to talk with anyone with questions about this kind of capacity building work, and I'll be part of the Q&A at the end of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis. Again, that was Alexis Moreno speaking from the Special Service for Groups, talking about the capacity building service of program evaluation for increased program effectiveness. Our third, and that is Alexis's contact information. Our third and last capacity building presenter of the day is Sharon Spira-Kushner from the Executive Service Corps. Sharon will be speaking with us about leadership development capacity building, and even more specifically, board leadership development capacity building. Sharon?
Thank you, Taylor, and good morning, everyone. As you can see from the screen, Executive Service Corps pursues the mission to strengthen nonprofits through coaching, consulting, and capacity building, and we provide that through experienced executives who volunteer their services. We have over 120 volunteers, executives, who are providing those services here in Southern California. As you can see, the majority of them do come from the business sector, but we find their experience extraordinarily transferable, and you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. But we are having a growing number that also come from the nonprofit sector, and of course government is represented as well. We serve about 150 local nonprofits each year, and as you can see, we've been in Los Angeles for 30 years now this year. We do have a national network of Executive Service Corps organizations, but we are each independent and have developed differently, and so the services that we offer are quite different one from the other, but we do all use the same model of experienced executives to deliver our capacity building services. As you can see on the left side of the slide, we have 4 broad focus areas. The first is executive leadership development. We're working with the top level of management from an organization, the CEO or the executive director, on professional coaching. The second is board development, which we'll be learning more about in a few moments. We also, of course, in that we work with nonprofits, do work on fundraising. And then finally, the largest sort of catch-all category is management consulting. We do strategic planning, we do financial services, human resources, operations, any of the kind of things that a senior executive would have experience with and be able to advise on for a nonprofit organization. The reason that folks would choose an Executive Service Corps for the service delivery model is on the right-hand side. All of our consultants are executive level. At the minimum, they've been senior managers. Not necessarily all CEOs, but we have plenty of other C-levels, vice presidents, et cetera. So they have the experience of leading organizations, of leading people, of making change. And that is really what we believe is the core of our theory of change. Leaders have to lead, and they have to lead well and effectively. And so that's the area of the organization that we focus on, and we see in the results that the ripple effect through the organization all the way down to the level of the client receiving the services from the effective leadership. Because our executives volunteer with us, we can put our services out to the community at very affordable prices. Third, and perhaps most importantly, as you can see, we deliver our services through a coaching modality of service. We call our volunteers consultants, but truly they are executive coaches. It's a developmental approach. We sometimes do some transactional work, but much more often it's helping the organization learn what they need to, what those people need to, learn what they need to know in order to do their job more effectively, and then implement it with support from our coaches so that they can continue those improvements beyond the period of assistance. We also will generally put together a team for a client agency so we can rely on several individuals with diverse experience. And then we do have a very extensive training program. Our volunteers can get up to 30 trainings per year, and as you can see, those trainings focus on best practices in the nonprofit sector and also translating for-profit experience to the nonprofit sector, or often from larger nonprofits to smaller organizations, which many of our nonprofits, of course, are. The clients that we can work with, because we do take this coaching approach, actually are very, very broad. We do only work with existing nonprofits or government agencies or an organization that's already been formed within an incubator or financial fiscal sponsor. But because it is a customized approach, we can work with almost any size of organization, almost any type of organization at all life cycle stages, brand new, going through retrenchment, sometimes winding down, Often, however, they are at an inflection point, which is why they need our services. But no matter their size, no matter the type of services they deliver, or if they even have services yet, the two things that are critical is that what we're doing often involves a culture change. And because of that, it really does need a deep commitment from both the executive leadership and the board of directors. And then second is because our consultants don't really do for, they do with, they coach and they teach, there really does need to be enough human infrastructure for our coaches to work with. So we're not having a leave behind, but that actually there's something that goes on beyond. Specifically, our board development services have the goal of helping the boards of directors better understand their critical goals and their critical role with respect to both governance and leadership. Of course, leadership responsibilities may differ depending on the life cycle stage of the organization. Many of you, I'm sure, have been on the boards of newer organizations where the board has to be much more hands-on. And then older organizations with more infrastructure, it becomes a more institutional role with the board. But we do both and everything in between. And we assist the board in developing the right infrastructure and culture for the role that they need to have with that organization in order to do their most critical role, which is the governance and leadership. Within our board development, it can be offered in two different ways. It can be a customized consultation, which is the example that I'll be sharing with you shortly, or as part of what we call a cohort program, where several organizations participate at once. And actually, the program that CCF, the California Community Foundation, funds with Executive Service Corps currently, is called the Board Leaders Institute, and it is a cohort program. It's a year-long program where for 6 months, the executive director and 2 leaders from their board, their chair and hopefully a chair-elect or someone who might become one, will work together for evening classes, not only with the instructor and the other organizations, but also with their coach. And then in between the evening sessions, which are once a month, and then for 6 months after that, they're working in the customized fashion with their coach on translating the learning from the classroom into their organization and then creating and implementing plans for improvements that they have selected to take them to the next level of effectiveness. We were hoping through modern technology to have our client speak with you today, Rigo Saborio, the Chief Executive of St. Barnabas Senior Services. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make that happen quite yet, but I'm going to be presenting his slides, so imagine his voice speaking these words. St. Barnabas Senior Services has just completed a year-long board development project with us. As you can see from the slide, they're a very significant institution in the Los Angeles community near downtown, providing very significant services to the senior population within a 15-mile radius, and they're very much a leader in the field. We set out together to pursue these goals that they had defined. They felt very important that they increase the level of engagement and commitment of their existing board members, and you can see specifically some of the measures that they had identified at the beginning that they were looking for. And they also wanted to strategically recruit new quality board members that would better reflect their current needs of their evolving organization. Part of that is the changing population of the area that they've served, and then, as you can see, enhancing their connectedness to certain communities that they felt were critical for them achieving their goals. Our specific job together was our consultant team. In this case, we happened to provide them with 2 consultants. One was an experienced organizational development consultant in private practice. He had initially been with KPMG and other consulting houses and has his own practice, and also with a professional licensed executive coach. That was the team that we happened to put together for this group. Our team worked with the leadership of St. Barnabas to provide a framework with timelines and milestones to achieve the goals that they had identified, offering guidance for increasing the members' understanding of what their roles and responsibilities would be and how they would then develop into those roles. Our coaches conducted regular sessions with the board chair and the CEO, both separately and together, to assist with developing those strategies, creating tools, and supporting that implementation when what was planned didn't actually execute the exact way that it was imagined in the conference room ahead of time, and then what needed to be done to change direction slightly and stay on track. And they, of course, also participated in meetings with the rest of the board members to help facilitate their learning process. And in Rigo's words, these next 2 slides are what he identified as the primary outcomes of this engagement. Helping to cement the relationship between the CEO and the board chair, who in this case happened to be newly elected to her role. Strengthening the board capacity in some very specific ways. these results here again, these are Rigo's words. 100% of their existing board members signed a new commitment letter that the consultants and the leadership had drafted together. 100% participated in their board retreat, and as you can see, it was a very significant growth from the year before. And then 100% board members now actively participating on the board committees. But the next bullet, I think, is the most significant one of all and really speaks to the leadership of this particular organization. One is always looking for these kinds of results, and generally, of course, one is happy when one gets anywhere close to 100, not even necessarily hoping that that will be the goal. Not only did they achieve that 100% number in all of those measures, but they actually did it with no attrition from the existing board members. When one goes through these kinds of processes, typically you expect that you're going to lose some people. Sometimes people that you actually want to lose, the people that are no longer so healthy for your organization and it's time to move on. But sometimes we also know that we take a risk of having some people who we would prefer to stay with us who don't want to carry out their duties in the way that's now expected of them. So again, I think this really speaks to the leadership at this organization that they were able to make these great strides and not lose a single existing board member. Further, Rigo shared that there was a significant increase, as you could see, in meeting attendance and participation in the meetings. They now have a formalized board recruitment process, and as they've begun that, they've already successfully met some of their recruitment goals right out of the gate. They have better ethnic representation. They have achieved representation from the banking industry, which you may recall from a few slides ago was one of their goals. And their board members are now helping more with the funders, and they've already gotten 2 new gifts directly from one individual who's even only in the board pipeline, hasn't even yet been formally put onto the board, but has stepped up in such a way already, which again was one of their goals to begin with. When we take a step back and look at what the sort of longer-term outcomes from this engagement will be and what they're already beginning to see, again, this is what Rigo has identified. The benefits of their participating in this project with ESC, they believe very strongly that their sustainability as an organization has been enhanced through beginning this process and what will be continued from it. They're accessing the financial, intellectual, and social capital of their board members. Developing a culture of partnership, as all of you know, as involved donors and participants in the nonprofit community, it really is a partnership between executive leadership, professional leadership, and the voluntary leadership in the nonprofit sector. It's one of the things that makes us unique. And so to really have that healthy partnership leading the organization together, each giving from their own strengths. Also, through this better board engagement, they believe they're making effective, efficient, and meaningful use of all of their board members. And very significantly, because together they're participating and thinking through things collectively and critically, they are better able to make the vital decisions that, as we all know, are facing nonprofits these days more than ever. They've also been successful in beginning to build a constellation, a community of support around a constellation of leadership. Often in the nonprofit, there's one charismatic individual who is so aligned with that organization that that's the organization's success. It's, of course, much more healthy in the long term if you have that, even if you are lucky enough to have that individual, to have several people who anchor the organization in the community so the organization can continue no matter what happens to that charismatic leader. So when we asked Rigo who he would say was the ideal candidate for such services beyond himself, again, he summarized it in this way. For an organization who's looking to build its board, again, various life cycle levels he felt would be appropriate. Organization looking to clarify the board's role and focus. Boards take on so many different roles within organizations over time and depending on the people there that often it's really important for the board to come to common understanding with the executive leadership about what's the best use of their resources and time. Of course, increasing the board's engagement and commitment in these very specific ways that they set out to do to begin with. And then another byproduct, however, was because of this process having such better communication that really led to these stronger relationships and stronger outcomes for the organization. And then also because of this process, really being able to look at what that relationship was like between those key 2 leaders, the professional CEO and the board chair, the voluntary leader, to really have a strong relationship together, but also really understand that relationship and have a very professional process to take a look at how that relationship worked and how it could be enhanced. final slide shows our contact information. We have obviously plenty more to share with all of you, and we are so pleased that through California Community Foundation and your own work in the community, we are able to do work like this with many, many organizations. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. That was Sharon Spira-Kushner of the Executive Service Corps discussing the capacity building service of board leadership development. So we have heard from these three kinds of capacity building services: board leadership development, program evaluation for increased program effectiveness, as well as financial sustainability. We've heard about how capacity building services can be particularly valuable in times of change, whether that's change in leadership within the organization, with external funding streams, or potentially with external laws that could impact the organization. We've also heard an overarching theme about how capacity building services can also be applicable if an organization has a philosophy of seeking continuous development and continuous strengthening to improve their sustainability and ultimately the impact of their service to the community. We're now opening for our question and answer session, and I look forward to incorporating your questions into this discussion. Our first question is, what is an appropriate level of commitment for a philanthropist or a donor or any organization that is looking to support capacity building organizations? I think this is addressing not only magnitude of grant size, but also the time length of grant size. How long do we need to have a capacity building interaction? Does anybody want to address this? This is Carla.
I think really it depends on where we're looking on lately. You know, we are a consulting firm ourselves, and although we're a nonprofit, I have to be careful, be transparent with that. But depending on the level of impact that we want to have with the community organization, it really depends, and I know that's a typical consulting answer. If you want to buy a Mercedes, you can't buy it with $10,000. In terms of the impact that we want to have with the organization, like I said, we conduct an assessment. Where is the organization at? Sometimes we would come in, and is it really just setting a structure of financial reporting, really educating the board and the leadership, and really helping them understand the financial data. So it could be really focusing on education, and it's a 3-month engagement. But if it's beyond that, where the organization really needs to have not only the financial structure set up, but also really work on the training and long-term sustainability of setting up reports and adjusting and things of that nature, that could be anywhere between 6 months, a year, to really make that investment and also make it a very comprehensive approach. To us, financial, the capital structure is one very important component of mission and programs and capacity. So to us, it's really important, and I'm very pleased to see that St. Barnabas is one of our clients that we work with, that it went to the Executive Service Corps to talk about board governance, because that's also a very essential component for us. It's creating a balance that's essential. So to me, that's a starting point, the foundation, the capital structure, but it also has to be complemented with a comprehensive approach where you're working with the organization on the mission and programs and the capacity side and how is that supporting each other.
And that's at an institutional level. So if a capacity building organization is working with a nonprofit client to engage in a specific kind of service institution-wide, what about if there's a specific department within the organization that can bear for improvement or strengthening? Is there an opportunity to be of support on a smaller scale rather than institution-wide?
Hi, this is Erin. As a recipient of a lot of these grants ranging anywhere from $5 to $550,000, I'm going to speak directly to my experience. I think it really depends on what kind of impact that you want to make, whether it is really institution, agency-wide, or specific program-wide. And $5 was very significant in a way that how it was delivered to us and who gave it to us. And it really spoke to the work that we did and the impact that it had on the person who gave us the money. And it really boosted the morale of the entire team. But overall, I think what has been most helpful for our agency that provides direct services has been a multi-year grant, I would say 2 to 3 years, at least $200,000, because of the time it takes for the staff to fully understand the scope of the work and to educate themselves, educate the service recipients, and really make an impact and deliver the type of outcome that we want to, and that we can boast to you and say, here's what your money and your support bought the community. So short answer, I guess, to your question is multi-year, about $200,000, 2 to 3 years. But perhaps one of my colleagues can speak to the smaller projects, because, as I said, we appreciate every single dollar that you give us.
Yeah, and I believe, Alexis, in your presentation for Special Service for Groups, citing your practical application work with Peace for Kids, your nonprofit client, you had mentioned a department level of capacity building.
So we've been doing 2 things with them. On the one strand, we've been working with their entire agency to look at their agency-wide outcomes, their intended results for everyone. But one of the other pieces that has received a lot of attention is working with their staff that works with transition-age youth. These are youth from 15 to 20 who will soon be released from the foster care system. And we've been working specifically with them to build up their tools and their ability to collect data and analyze data. And that staff for that program is 2 people. So that's a much smaller project, a much smaller excuse me, area of activity that we can take on. In this instance, it's been part of our larger agency-wide efforts with Peace for Kids, but I could easily see that a smaller scale project could be defined really around a particular department.
Okay. And also, this is Carla with Nonprofit Finance Fund. In our retail work, when we work with individual organizations, besides being a grantee of foundation work, we also, our price range, for example, some of the tools that I went through, the management tools of cash flow planning or scenario planning, that could range anywhere between $15,000 to $30,000. So if a donor has, had $15,000 to contribute to my favorite organization, we could definitely customize our services to work with that organization.
Great. So what we're hearing in terms of range is if we want an institutional-wide engagement, what we've heard is a magnitude of potentially $200,000 over the course of 2 to 3 years. But we've also heard another level of engagement, which is $15,000 to $30,000 at a department level, or even down to specific staff that are responsible for certain parts of the organization. Thank you very much for that. And we have one more question, which is, to whom does a capacity building grant go? Does it go to the nonprofit organization to seek capacity building services, or is it more appropriate to go to the capacity building organization themselves with a mandate to work with the specific nonprofit clients? Would anybody like to address that? Alexis?
This is Alexis from SSG. I can talk a little bit about that. Our project was funded by CCS, and we then approached the participating agencies to offer our service at no cost to them. And, of course, they were eager to get services that had no out-of-pocket cost connected to it. What we found is that us coming pre-funded to them really allowed them to prioritize evaluation in a way that they otherwise may not have. Each of them said, yes, we know that we want to strengthen ourselves in terms of evaluation, but they were more focused on day-to-day needs or program funding needs. So it wasn't necessarily on their list of projects to fund. And what we found that as a sector, as a nonprofit sector, this is most typically the case. And as a matter of fact, last fall, UCLA did a study on the state of the nonprofit sector in Los Angeles, and nonprofits sort of ranked the areas which they would like to strengthen within their agencies, and evaluation was, I believe, in the top 5. And then there was a follow-up question. If you got X amount of dollars from a donor that was unrestricted, where would you spend the money? Top 3 were fundraising, communications, and program, and I think evaluation barely made it into the top 10 of the list. So while people and agencies understand that this is a need that they'd like to strengthen, in the day-to-day work, it often doesn't rise to the top of the priority list. So in our instance, being able to offer the evaluation capacity service really allowed them to prioritize and integrate evaluation into their ongoing work.
And of course, we have here 4 guests, 3 of whom are our capacity building organizations. So we appreciate the opportunity to field this question. It might be helpful to hear from our nonprofit client who is here to weigh in on this question.
I kind of chuckle. This is Erin with Care Center. I kind of chuckle regarding this question because for those of you who took Franklin Covey's time management classes, remember important and urgent, important not urgent, and I think it's one of those situations. I think if the NSF grant was not a service grant and if CCF just gave us unrestricted funds, I'm not sure if we would have spent the money to do the scenario planning. But as I said during my presentation, it was an extremely critical experience, tutorial that we went through, and the tools that we gained from it is just most invaluable and is going to help us for years and years to come. So there are things that we want, things we need, but if it's not a service grant, we are not likely to do a lot of the things that we want on our wish list. We would just address the direct services, the critical needs of the community or the clients that we serve, and not take care of ourselves.
Thanks for that honesty, Erin. This is Sharon from Executive Service Corps. I mean, in essence, honestly, most of us organizations would go either way. You can give it to the organization who's the capacity builder. You can give it to the client themselves and have that understanding that this is what it's for. But what's most important is that there is buy-in. Executive Service Corps actually has a philosophy that unless the donor specifically prohibits it, all of our clients actually are required to pay something. It might be as little as $500. Rigo paid $500 for a year of these incredibly high-level services that had such an impact on his organization. But for us, we feel that everybody's got to have some skin in the game. And sometimes for a nonprofit organization, even finding that $500 is critical. But what's more important than that is the idea that the nonprofit, the capacity builder, and the funder, if there is one involved, are all working on this together. You've got to scope the project appropriately. Whatever the funds are that are available, let's figure out the right scope for that amount of funds, the right amount of expectation to have beyond it, and to build in some implementation support. You might not be able, for my nonprofit capacity building peers might not be able to offer what we can with executive volunteers who will meet with you once a week for the next 5 years if you need it to keep it embedded, but certainly to be able to have at least a few sessions of what's happening down the line and how can we readjust, because that's really one of the keys. You can get these great tools, but if there isn't that ongoing support to that implementation, you'll lose a lot of the impact that could have been had. So the most important message is as a partnership and with an appropriate scope to what's available and what the need is.
That's a great point, Sharon. Thank you. The emphasis on the importance of proactiveness in both parties to collaborate and really achieve this goal of organizational sustainability and strengthening together. So thank you to our 3 presenters from Executive Service Corps, Special Service for Groups, Nonprofit Finance Fund, and of course our nonprofit client highlight, who we're very appreciative to have Erin Pax from CARE. And if there is any additional opportunity or inquiry, please feel free to contact the California Community Foundation. We thank you very much for your participation. If you'd like to learn more with your philanthropic team here at CCF, we welcome the opportunity to continue the conversation. Terry Mosqueda, our Director of Donor Relations, and myself, Taylor Mitchell, look forward to speaking with you soon. And thank you again for your participation.